I've come to seek and to save the lost. And spiritually, the majority of Americans are lost.
My poor little children, one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
Saludos en ACOC familia. Welcome to the 2020 Lamb's Agenda Bilingual Virtual Conference. From wherever you're joining us in the nation, thank you for watching. Bienvenidos a la conferencia virtual bilingüe de la Agenda del Cordero 2020. Me llamo Gideon Salazar, sirvo como el director ejecutivo de la NHCLC. Yo soy tu anfitrión esta semana, un programa impactante, maravilloso. Esta semana estamos enfocando en lo que es la Agenda del Cordero. Y lo estamos haciendo a través de 6 temas importantes: vida, libertad de religión, justicia bíblica, educación hispana, dar la bienvenida al extranjero y oración, life, religious liberty, biblical justice, Hispanic education, welcoming the stranger, and prayer. And today we've been talking about Hispanic education, and we're asking ourselves the question, can we reconcile the message of Billy Graham with the march of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? ¿Podemos reconciliar el mensaje del reverendo Billy Graham con la marcha del Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? And in today's morning and evening sessions, we're talking about welcoming the stranger, dar la bienvenida al extranjero. We heard this morning from an immigration panel led by our national chapter director, Reverend Abraham Hernandez, and 2 wonderful pastors and leaders of the NHCOC that joined him for that panel. But immigration is such an important topic. Whether you're talking about immigration policy, undocumented immigrants, national borders, or even dreamers. For example, the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, in accordance with our organizational mandate to honor the sanctity of life and pursue biblical justice, we support the protection of dreamers from deportation through the deferred action for childhood arrivals until or unless superseded by congressional legislation that grants permanent protection for dreamers. That's what we want to see, permanent protection for dreamers. We understand that we cannot allow the fate of 700,000 young men and women who are DACA recipients to be decided by one individual. And so the NHCOC commits to utilizing its public platforms to convince the White House administration, to convince Congress to end any second attempts at ending DACA without first providing permanent protection for dreamers. And so we're glad that we've brought you on today to talk about welcoming the stranger and what that means and how the NHCOC views that through our world view. Perhaps you're tuning in and don't know what the NHCOC is, who we are, what we do. The NHCOC is a nonpartisan organization wholly committed to one purpose, and that's the Lamb's Agenda. La NHCLC es una organización no partidista, totalmente comprometida con el avance de la agenda del Cordero. But more than that, por la gracia de Dios, para la gloria de Dios, la Conferencia Nacional del Liderazgo Cristiano Hispano es la Asociación Nacional Evangélica Hispana. La NHCLC es la organización cristiana latina más grande tanto en América como en el mundo. Simplemente dicho, existimos para servir, representar y liderar la comunidad evangélica hispana, reconciliando el mensaje de salvación por medio de Cristo con la marcha por la justicia, todo mientras avanzamos la agenda del Cordero. The NHCOC will continue to exercise prophetic leadership, reconciling the vertical and the horizontal planes of the Christian cross, sanctification with service, conviction with compassion, the image of God with the habits of Christ, holiness and humility, John 3:16, and Matthew 25, the prophetic with the practical. That is the Lamb's Agenda. That is the NHCOC, and that is what we do. We want to expose the light of Christ by reconciling the message of Billy Graham with the march of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're so glad that you joined us today, and we're listening this week to amazing faith leaders that are ministering directly to you, ministers such as Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, Reverend Tony Suarez. We've heard from Dr. Samuel Pagan, from Pastor Eliezer Bonilla, from lawyer Ryan Tucker, for another minister, Todd Nettleton, And tonight we're going to listen to a wonderful man of God, president of Ashland University, Dr. Carlos Campo. He's going to bring a wonderful message talking about the intersection of immigration, answering what does that mean. He's going to explain it, and he does it so beautifully and so wonderfully. Right now, I want to make mention of something very important. I want to let you know about Pastor Sam's new book that's coming out. It's coming out in next month, in fact. And we want to let you know that you can get your hands on it. You can go ahead and even start to pre-order it. And I'm going to put the link up on the bottom of the screen so you can find out how to get this book. But I really love this message that Pastor Sam has put together for a world for such a time as this. We are living in an unprecedented time, and we've heard that many times. But right now, many people are just figuring, how can I survive throughout this time? How can we just get through? But Pastor Sam's message is more than that. It's not a message of getting by. It's not a message of just simply surviving. It's a message of thriving. And we want to see you thrive. We want your churches to thrive, no matter the season of life. And he has a message for you, how to live a holy, healthy, healed, happy, humble, hungry, and honoring life. And I pray that you will get your hands on this book. You can pre-order it right now going to SamuelRodriguezBooks.com, www.SamuelRodriguezBooks.com, and you can pre-order your copy. It's a book that's going to radicalize your life and change your life. And we're so looking forward to being able to discuss his book more in depth within the coming weeks. But I want to let you know about this wonderful opportunity to get your hands on this book early. Right now, we're going to enter into a time of worship. And we've been so blessed by the worship this week. We've been blessed by Miel San Marcos, Ingrid Rosario. And right now, we're going to actually be blessed again by Miel San Marcos. And I want to invite you to worship along with us during this time. Set your hearts, prepare your hearts for the message we're going to hear from Dr. Carlos Campo in just a few minutes. But would you worship with me? Would you spend a couple minutes just seeking the face of God, and just preparing our hearts for the message that he has for us this evening?
Señor, tú eres impresionante. Hoy tu iglesia te adora. En todas las naciones, Jesús. Corro como niño, corro como hijo. Vengo a refugiarme a tus pies. Corro a ti sediento, corro a ti hambriento. Sacia y llena todo mi ser. Te doy mi alabanza, mi mejor fragancia. Puedes respirar mi adoración. Con manos alzadas peleo mis batallas. El cielo abres, hoy puedo ver. Impresionante es tu gloria. Impresionante es tu poder. Impresionante es tu presencia. Tú estás aquí. Te amamos, Señor. Corre a ti tu iglesia, corre a ti tu amada. Nos basta hoy tu gracia y perdón. No nos moveremos, permaneceremos. Nuestra recompensa eres tú. Te doy mi alabanza, mi mejor fragancia. Puedes respirar mi adoración. Impresionante es tu poder, impresionante es tu presencia, tú estás aquí, mi amado. Impresionante es tu gloria, impresionante es tu poder, impresionante es tu presencia, tú estás aquí. Señor, levantamos nuestras manos, creemos en tu poder, creemos en tu amor, tú eres impresionante. Gracias, Jesús. Y hoy la iglesia anunciamos que tú eres nuestro libertador.
Amen. Estás viendo la conferencia virtual bilingüe de la Agenda del Cordero. You're watching the 2020 Lamb's Agenda Bilingual Virtual Conference. What a wonderful time of worship. Today we're talking about immigration. Specifically, we're talking about welcoming the stranger, dar la bienvenida al extranjero. And right now we're going to hear a message from Dr. Carlos Campo, who is the president of Ashland University. Wonderfully articulate individual, wonderfully wise, but God-fearing. And if you don't know who Dr. Carlos Campo is, he is the president of Ashland University. Prior to that, Dr. Campo served as the president of Regent University in Virginia Beach from August 2010 to October 2013. Prior to becoming president, Dr. Campo served as chief academic officer and provost at Regent University from 2008 to 2010. From 2005 to 2008, Dr. Campo was at the College of Southern Nevada and served as the school's chief academic officer from 2007 to 2008 and as dean of the College of Arts and Letters from 2005 to 2007. Dr. Campo received his PhD in English with an emphasis in drama, his Master of Arts degree in English, and his Bachelor of Arts degree in theater, all from the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, Nevada. Dr. Campo has many publications to his credit in the areas of academic papers, workshops, and commentaries. It's an honor and privilege to welcome Dr. Carlos Campo to this conference. I pray you're blessed by his message.
I've been thinking a lot lately about intersections. I know that intersections can be fun places. Intersections are places where people gather to meet. I mean, isn't the ultimate trivia question really, where did the word trivia come from? And if you split the word right down the middle, there's the answer. Tri, three, via, roads. The place where three roads meet is a place where people gather and talk, and very often talk about nothing. And that's why it's trivia. I also remember being an undergraduate student and reading the famous play Oedipus Rex. And I recall that it was literally at the place where three roads meet that Oedipus met his father. And it was on that road where neither one of these proud men would give way. And so there was an altercation. That altercation led to Oedipus slaying his father and fulfilling a prophecy that had been spoken of him long ago. Yes, that example demonstrates that intersections can be dangerous places, places that need traffic lights, places that need explanation. And so let's think and talk more about intersections. I know that borders are intersections. I think about rivers being borders between states in the U.S., and my attention is drawn to the Ohio River, not only because it's not so far from where I'm speaking today at Ashland University in Ohio, but because it's where my mother grew up, right along that river in Maysville, Kentucky. She talked about that river a lot, how it shaped life along the river. I know she almost drowned in that river. But she also talked about it being a haven for people. It was a place, a conduit for African Americans who were suffering under slavery and came to Ohio and then to Kentucky, crossing the Ohio River and to safety, and for them, a new life. I think about borders as intersections of lives and geography. I think about the intersection in regards to my own father's border that he crossed as an immigrant. And it's truly the intersection of immigration that I'd like to discuss at some length. The reality is, when my father came from Havana, Cuba to New York City, he brought with him not just the place from which he came, but also an expectation and all the person that he was, with all of the hope and promise that a young man brings when he's on a new adventure. But I'm sure that there was fear in him as well. How will I be accepted in this new country? What are these people like? Will they frown upon my dark skin that is the color of the café con leche that I drink every day? Will they be concerned about the thick accent that I have and my inability to speak the language? What he found was a place that welcomed him, that saw him for who he was, and allowed him to establish a career that I know I would say was very successful. But I know that when we talk about immigration, there are intersections of philosophy within that very topic. For example, some will say to me, Carlos, anyone who comes to this country without the appropriate application, paperwork, and process, these are lawbreakers. And when you break the rule of law, you need to suffer the consequences, perhaps be returned to your country of origin. Others come and say, Carlos, my philosophy is that there's a rule of love that supersedes the rule of law, that says, no matter your past, you are now here in this country, and we will receive you as a nation founded on Christian principles. That's not the intersection that I want to cover today in regards to immigration, because I know there's an intersectionality of philosophy around the economic argument, isn't there? The idea that these people are a drain to our economy. They come, they steal our jobs, they impede progress, they don't pay taxes. Others say, well, that's not exactly true. Many of them get fake IDs and so pay federal income tax. They're not a drain on the economy, although social services can be taxed. But even the economic argument is not one that I will follow today. There's an intersectionality regarding whether or not these people bring with them crime. There's a lot to say that their crime rates are actually lower than the average crime rate of an American citizen. But see, that's not the argument that I'd like to make today either. I'd like to bring us to another intersection, frankly, the intersection that transcends all others. It's the most transcendent, powerful intersection of all, and it's the cross of Jesus Christ. It's on that cross, the stipe is that permanent part of the cross, that part that the Romans would have drilled into the ground. And it's that part that they took from the Greeks and the Persians before them. The second part of that cross is the patibulum. That's the part that was carried by the prisoner who would be crucified. In this case, it was Jesus of Nazareth who would carry that cross to Golgotha, that skull, that place called the skull, and he would be hung upon that cross, literally at the center of that cross, of that intersection, hung the Savior of the world. And to me, that intersection changes the way we look at immigration, frankly, because that cross is representative of the call to every person. And that call is to see our lives truly reflected in that cross. It's explained beautifully by the president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, my friend, Pastor Sammy Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez would say, Carlos, it's that cross, that stipe that reflects our relationship to God. It's Billy Graham's gospel that is combined with Martin Luther King Jr.'s reach out to his brothers and sisters. It's our relationship to God in the stipe, and in the patibulum, our relationship to our brothers and sisters. Truly the law summed up in those two, to love your God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself. And the cross, a reflection of that very thing. And when I think about the cross as it teaches through the ministry of Christ, who truly immigrated in his own ministry a number of times. He immigrated to Samaria to sit upon a well and wait at noon for a woman to come. And when she came, he literally crossed many borders. I mean, he crossed the border that would say, you cannot speak to a woman. When his disciples came, did they not say, Master, what are you doing? Speaking to her. But he crossed another border that would say a person of some repute himself, speaking to a woman whose reputation was dismal. She was an outcast. But that's the God we serve, who would cross those cultural borders to say, my love sees her for who she is. She became one of the great evangelists of her day, and her testimony was simple. He told me everything about myself in a world that would tell me just one thing about myself, that I was a harlot, that I was a pariah. But Jesus came to tell me something different, and her testimony led to the salvation of others. I know that God speaks to us today about immigration. And as I think about resolving this thorny problem, I know it won't be resolved overnight. There is no simple plan. But surely there is a way for Americans to say we can call people, millions of people, out of the shadows into the light of a God who was light, who brought with him the light of love and truth. And yes, we must control our borders. And yes, it is right that people suffer consequences. But when these people have made America their home, when these people have had children who know no other home except America and love this country, when these people, I recall living in the Southwest and knowing that these people were not just coming across the border, a border that was carefully protected, and asking them not to come, demanding that they remain in their own country. Frankly, it was just the opposite. We were not just looking the other way, but inviting them to come and work in the construction that kept prices down and affordable for me and others in the Southwest, that kept me from paying higher prices for strawberries because these people were in our fields working for very low wages. It simply doesn't seem fair to raise the specter of the rule of law and expel them from our country when we have invited them to come, when we are a nation of immigrants that has said for centuries that we should invite those who are weary to our shores to find rest. So in this solution, my hope and my prayer is that we will return to that very center of the cross of Christ, to that intersection where he hung and died and spoke to us about a better way, a way that does lead with mercy but doesn't simply look the other way. He came to fulfill the law. There's a way to fulfill the law and also welcome the stranger, to say to the stranger, we are all wanderers in a sense, searching for our God. I know that as an educator, many would say, Carlos, there is no intersection between faith and intellect. And I have said and continue to say that cannot be true, that a true pursuit of truth must be a pursuit of God, and that someone who has a blind faith clearly has no faith at all, because when we put our faith to the test, it's when we know our God the most. And so I urge you, as we look at this intersection, this difficult border that could separate us, let's return together to the cross of Christ, and look to him to be our guide, to be the one who, at a place that could be dangerous, say there's a way forward, a way that can take law and mercy and combine them in a way that says we are a land that brings people in to say you are part of America, and that we will not negate the need for the rule of law. We will also not negate the fact that you are a contributor, that you bring entrepreneurism and faith and family and so many things that make America great. I pray that in these days ahead, we look to the Lord, our Savior, to bring us together at the cross, at an intersection that doesn't have to be dangerous, but instead a place where brother and sister can meet. And while we may have differences, we'll come together and strengthen our nation.
Wow. Dr. Carlos Campos' message on the intersection of immigration was just powerful. And you can hear the heart of the NHCLC is really, how can we honor the Imago Dei of every individual? And part of that, and we believe the best way to do it is to welcome the stranger. How can we be a nation that welcomes the stranger, that honors the rule of law, but at the same time understands the value of immigrants, the value of people who come from other nations, that bring their skills, that bring their resources, that bring their culture over. So thankful for that message. But to think about it in the terms of the cross, and think of how Jesus interacted with immigrants and thinking of how Jesus lived out his faith and how he himself immigrated from town to town, sharing a gospel message of love. You know, if immigration is important to you, we would encourage you to continue to stay up to date with what the NHCLC is doing and how we're engaging with the White House, how we're engaging with Congress, how we're engaging at state levels to talk about immigration from a biblical perspective, from the perspective of the cross, the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal, our conviction with compassion, our John 3:16 with our Matthew 25. That's where we want to exist, in the intersection of these two. We have a very important election coming up in November, and we have a very special message for you from Jackie Velasquez. And I just wanted you to take a moment to listen to this message.
Hi, I'm Jackie Velasquez. This November, we have a very important election coming up. Some would say probably the most important election of our lifetime. Whew! I hope that you'll remember that when you vote, you're not just voting for a person, you're voting for the values that that person represents. Don't forget that. As Christians, we have a responsibility to move beyond party colors and look beyond individual personalities and to consider how that individual cares for or represents the biblical values that are dear to us. Values like life, our freedom to worship, and caring for the poor. This November and in every election, I encourage you to vote your values, to vote your faith. Make a pledge to vote this November and learn more about how to vote your faith at myfaithvotes.org. That's myfaithvotes.org.
Thank you so very much for that message, Jackie Velasquez. We want to encourage you to vote your faith, to vote biblical values, to vote life, religious liberty, and biblical justice this November. We want to invite you to pledge to vote with us. If you visit this website at the bottom of your screen, in fact, if you don't have time to write it down, you can actually look at the description in this post, and you can find a link to where you can pledge. And when you click on that link there at the website that's at the bottom of your screen, they'll take you to a page that says pledge to vote. And it provides a sad note. Really, it says, sadly, 25 million Christians do not plan to vote in November. Don't waste a chance to shape our nation. Pledge to vote so we can count on you to stand for biblical values. And when you click on pledge, it takes you to a place where you can fill out your first name, your last name, the zip code, and an email address. And when you hit pledge, you're going to be receiving information that's valuable, voter registration information on polling locations, party platforms, and many of these resources available in both English and Spanish. So please, please don't waste your vote this November. Pledge to vote. Visit myfaithvotes.org. Take the pledge with the NHCLC. Click the link that's in the description of this post and do it alongside of us. Pledge to vote. We couldn't ask for more this November. And another thing I want to encourage you on is to stay up to date on what the NHCLC is doing around the nation on a continual basis. I want to share with you some of our social media handles, and we want to encourage you to find us on Twitter. We're there at New Evangelicals. That's our handle. You can find us on Instagram at NHCLC, and you can find us on Facebook. You can click like and follow us, and we're always posting information from the education world on scholarships and resources available to you. We're posting information on the things that we're engaging Congress on, engaging the White House on, and issues that are important to us: life, religious liberty, biblical justice. So please take a moment to follow us on our social media platforms so you can receive the latest information. Visit www.nhclc.org. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the NHCLC Now, and you'll receive weekly information on what we're doing. There's so much going around on the nation, and that's the best place to find out all that we're doing. Right now, I want to invite you to listen to a word from some great friends of ours from Church Mutual. They are doing such wonderful things around the nation. So please take a moment to listen to their story.
For more than 120 years, we've been there in churches and schools, nonprofit and human service organizations, camps, and senior living communities. We've been there in times of joy and in times of loss. Our success has been measured not by the bottom line, but by our unwavering commitment to protecting our customers so they can continue their important work. Thank you for helping each other. Thank you for helping our communities. Thank you for your dedication to serving and inspiring others.
Thank you, Church Mutual, for investing in this year's 2020 Lambs Agenda Bilingual Virtual Conference. And we want to thank you for joining and watching our 10th session in this week's Lambs Agenda Bilingual Virtual Conference. The NHCLC invites you to join us tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. and tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. Central for our final day in sessions 11 and 12. Tomorrow we're focusing on probably the most important thing we could talk about is prayer. And we're going to actually have a time of prayer tomorrow morning with Reverend Abraham Hernandez, who is our national chapter director, and a couple of his friends that are also chapter directors in the respective regions and leaders in the respective regions. I'm Gideon Salazar. I serve as the executive director of the NHCLC, and I thank you for tuning in with us this week and for advancing the Lamb's agenda wherever you go. Juntos, para la gloria de Dios, cambiaremos el mundo. Together, for the glory of God, we will change the world.